Welcome to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast. This podcast is dedicated to EAS employees of the U.S. Postal Service and members of the National Association of Postal Supervisors. So, pour yourself a cup of coffee and join us for today's episode. And now, here's your host, Robert Wakefield.
Good morning, Branch 32. And good morning to our EAS friends across the country. Welcome to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast, presented by the Nashville Post Office Credit Union. I'm your host, Robert Wakefield, president of NAPS Branch 32. Thank you so much. That's right. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. It's great to have you all here. So let's go ahead and pour that first cup. This March 29th, join us in celebrating a century of trust and a century of service. The Nashville Post Office Credit Union is hosting its 100th annual meeting celebration at the luxurious Sonesta Hotel from 4:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. Mark your calendars for a night of history, festivities, and fun. For more details and updates, like and follow our Facebook page and be a part of this monumental milestone. The Nashville Post Office Credit Union, people helping people since 1925. For our first cup today, I wanted to piggyback on what we talked about last week, and that was the two words, dignity and respect. If you have not listened to that podcast, shame on you. Okay. No, there's no shame. No shame whatsoever. But go back and check that out. We actually gave it the definition of what it was and how it looked like. And while I was doing some research on this subject, I ran across something that the Rio Grande district dropped back in 2016. And it was their policy of dignity and respect. Now, I know that going over policies doesn't exactly scream exciting, but hang with me here. This one's worth unpacking. So grab that cup of Joe, settle in, and let's talk about creating, a work environment that people actually enjoy. So when we get down to the basics, here it is, and we talked about this in the last podcast. Here's the gist of the policy. It's about keeping things professional. It laid down some very basic ground rules in order to achieve that. Listen to this. No name calling. Oh, okay. I like that. No crude language. Oh, nice. I could deal with that. No stepping into someone's personal bubble. In short, if you were going to just break it down into the low gravy, don't be a jerk. It's pretty straightforward. Treat others the way you want to be treated. That is biblical, isn't it? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Absolutely. But let's get real. Sometimes people need a reminder, especially when stress levels are high enough or deadlines are looming. They don't remember to keep this cool. The whole idea of this policy is to create a workplace where everyone feels safe, where everyone feels respected, and where everyone feels valued. So the policy goes on and it talks about how to handle conflict. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Well, let's face it. We've all been there. You're butting heads with a coworker, you're angry at your boss, someone's tone rubs you the wrong way, or maybe you're just having a bad day. It's easy for those things to spiral out of control. Well, the policy has some solid advice on how to handle this. And number one, it's keep your cool. Losing your temper doesn't solve anything. It just makes things worse. And number two, it says listen. Really listen. Sometimes conflicts just blow up because people aren't hearing each other. And the third thing that it mentions is open communication. Be honest but also be respectful. The goal isn't to win the argument. It's to find a solution that works out for everyone. I'm looking at the policy right now, and it says this right here, and I thought this was really good. Employees are responsible for handling themselves professionally in a business work environment. All of us work best in environments marked by mutual respect, personal dignity, and support, which utilizes one's skills and abilities. And then it goes on and talk about the things that we just mentioned about controlling your temper, listening first, looking for areas of agreement, postponing action so both parties can look through the problem. So, why does all this matter? What's the big deal about dignity and respect? Well, I mean, beyond the obvious, treating people well is a real thing. Respect isn't just about being nice. It's about creating an environment that people actually want to come and do their best work. You know, people work better in an environment of dignity and respect than they do with hostilities. I was told not too long ago, and we're going to talk about this in future podcasts. I was told not too long ago how someone lost their cool on a telecon or a Zoom meeting. And it made the environment so much worse for everyone. And I've been a part of that. You have too. You've seen managers go after subordinates on a Zoom meeting in front of people. That's just not right. That's just not the way to do that. And that's not the way to treat EAS employees. That's not the way to treat, your craft employees. It's just not the right way to do it. So respect matters. It just really, really does. It's about creating that environment that people actually want to work in. When you feel respected, you're more likely to speak up. You're more likely to share ideas. You're more likely to talk about it with your team and collaborate with each other. Now, on the flip side of that, a toxic workplace drags everybody down. Productivity takes a hit. Morale sinks to all-time lows. And you end up with not keeping people employed. If you treat your employees this way, you've got high turnover. And we all know how great the onboarding system is, how efficient that is. So we don't need to do that. So we really need to treat people the way that we want to be treated. So here's my question for you. What does respect look like in your workplace right now? What does it look like in your workplace right now? Are you being disrespected by your employees? Are you being disrespected by your boss? Are you being disrespected by your peers? Why is that? Maybe it has something, maybe a solution as simple as saying thank you or giving someone the benefit of the doubt that would end this type of frustration for you. Or maybe it's stepping up when you see someone being treated unfairly. Respect can show up in big ways. It can show up in small ways. But here's the thing. It always makes a difference. Respect and dignity are just two words that the Postal Service throws around like it throws around any other words, acronyms or whatever. But if they really, really mean it, and they take the advice that the Rio Grande District wisely put out May 13th, 2016, the Postal Service would be a great place to work. Now, don't get me wrong. It's still a great place to work. It just has its challenges. And part of that challenge is understanding what dignity and respect really is in the workplace. Well, hope you enjoyed that little policy review there. I tell you what, it's now time for me to pour that second cup. For 100 years, the Nashville Post Office Credit Union has been turning dreams into reality. Since opening our doors in 1925, we've been your trusted financial partner. Our success stories are countless, thanks to our core value, people helping people. Here's to another century of integrity, compassion, and commitment to your financial well-being. The Nashville Post Office Credit Union, a tradition of people helping people since 1925. All right, it's now to pour that second cup, and this episode is due to drop on March the 15th. That's right, March the 15th. And, you know, March the 15th is often referred to as the Ides of March because it has such a huge history. And so let me share some of these with you. In 44 BC, this is probably the second biggest thing that ever happened on March the 15th. 44 BC, Julius Caesar, the Roman dictator, was assassinated by a group of senators, including his friend Brutus and Cassius. How many of you remember reading the William Shakespeare play? I know I did. It was a huge moment in Roman history. That was 44 BC. In 1493, Christopher Columbus returned to Spain after his first voyage to the Americas. In 1820, the state of Maine was admitted to the Union. They were the 23rd state. Interesting. In 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson delivered his "We Shall Overcome" speech, introducing voting rights legislation during the Civil Rights Movement. And then finally, the biggest one of all took place in 1986. Robert Wakefield began his postal career at the U.S. in Lewisburg, Tennessee. That's right. That's right. My first day at the Postal Service was March the 15th. And, you know, how many of you remember your first day? Tell me what your first day was like by sending me a message at SaturdayCupOfJoe@gmail.com. I'll tell you about my first day. It was March the 15th, as I've mentioned. I work in Tennessee. We have, in the springtime, we have all these so-called winters where it's 70 one day, it's 20 the next. It's just crazy. And so this was one of those days where it was 70 the day before I started, and then the day I started, it felt like it was in the 30s. And so my supervisor took me around. He introduced me to all the employees that was there. And the only one I remembered was a goofy guy by the name of Spook. He turned out to be one of my best friends, but his nickname was Spook, S-P-O-O-K. And so anyway, so my supervisor took me to a carrier case, and he said, okay, Robert, I want you to put the flats here, and then put your letters up, and then pull down, and then Donnie here is going to take you out and show you how to deliver mail. I said, got it. Let's go. And so my supervisor walked away, and I leaned over to Donnie. I said, what's a flat? So, you know, you put up flats, you put up letters. I knew what a letter was. I didn't know they called them flats. I had no idea. So that was an interesting part of my first day. And I went out there, and it was cold, and I didn't wear enough coat. I was 23 years old. And it was a memorable day because I remember freezing to death on your very first day. But it was a great career. I retired 4 years ago, and I wouldn't give anything for the career because I made some of the best friends that I've ever had through the Postal Service, but especially through NAPS. And we've talked about that a lot. So just wanted to share with you that if you want to send any gifts to commemorate the anniversary of me starting at the Postal Service, please send those via Venmo payments. How about that? All right, that's going to do it for today's Saturday Cup of Joe presented by the Nashville Post Office Credit Union. You know what to do next. Like this podcast, subscribe, share this podcast. I haven't heard from any branches lately. What branch are you in? Let me know. I want to know what branch you are listening from, and you can send that to SaturdayCupOfJoe@gmail.com. All right, that's going to do it for today. I'm Robert Wakefield, and remember, every great weekend starts with a great cup of Joe. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of Robert Wakefield and do not necessarily reflect the views of the National Association of Postal Supervisors. We welcome your questions and comments, so send those to SaturdayCupOfJoe@gmail.com.